I'd like to welcome you to the Prince Charles this evening. I think you're about to watch what I believe is probably the most important film of our generation. It sets out in 90 entertaining and sometimes terrifying minutes why this whole myth that global warming doesn't exist is indeed a myth. And I think it leaves us with two choices. One is to close our eyes and learn to swim, and the other is to do something about it, take some action. At the Prince Charles, we've made a commitment to show an Inconvenient Truth every week throughout 2007.
Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us this evening at this special Big Ask screening of the Inconvenient Truth. Thank you to the Prince Charles Cinema from Friends of the Earth, and also be aware that not only is the film going to be shown here with other political figures coming in the months ahead, this will also be going on a UK tour with the opportunity for the public to meet their MPs in cinemas around the country. If you haven't already picked up one of these leaflets about the Big Ask campaign, then please do so, or go to thebigask.com and you can find out more information there about how you can get involved. So, we now have a bit of open space for all of you to ask some questions. David has very kindly agreed to be with us until about 8:45. So can I see any hands, please? Anybody who has any immediate questions? Gentleman down here, please.
Hello, my name's Jamie. Not really affiliated with anything, really. I'm just kind of curious. I had a question. I've done a little bit of reading up on a carbon emissions trading scheme. And what it appears to me is that it's a scheme that's very good, but in the end of it, the costs are going to end up kind of hitting the poorer people eventually by the ways of dissemination of fees and costs and so on and so forth. So what I was wondering, and looking at some other stuff as well, is that I was wondering whether there was any work being done to actually sort of stop the kind of current situation where the planning permission rules sort of are basically blocking anyone from having little wind power generators on their roofs and solar panels and things like that. And that's my question.
Do we need simpler planning permission so that it's as easy to put a windmill on your roof as it is to put up a satellite dish? The answer is yes. When will that happen? October the 1st, there'll be new planning laws to make sure that you're able to essentially have the same rules on that. I've just changed my electricity supplier 3 or 4 months ago, and actually it's pretty simple. You go onto the website, it takes 3 or 4 minutes. I chose a company where one of the voluntary organisations, one of the campaign organisations was able to say, we guarantee there's only renewable electricity that's coming from this source. So if you don't want to go through the fact of putting it on yourself, you can make sure you're only sourcing your electricity from that source, which I think is another way of doing it. The first part of your question was about trading schemes. I'm not sure if you were talking about business trading schemes or for individuals.
I was talking about business. Because we put their costs down to the rest of us.
Yeah, we have a system at the moment called what's called the European Emissions Trading Scheme, which covers half of the greenhouse gas emissions from this country. 48%. When we manage to include aviation, it'll be up to 53, 54%. And the way it works is that we set limits on the amount of pollution that those heavy emitting industries are allowed to pollute. Above that, they've got to pay for it. Below it, they've got an incentive to go as far as possible because they obviously make money out of it. The system is the world's first carbon trading scheme. It puts a price on carbon. Of course, you can say, well, it doesn't actually mean extra cost. Well, not if you take energy efficiency seriously. And all of our evidence, and you saw a bit of this from the outdoor films, that there's big money to be made and big savings to be made from being, I think you can be pro-environment and pro-economic growth at the same time. You don't have to hit the poor, and part of our responsibility as government is to make sure you have proper subsidy for things like loft insulation and other things.
Why can't we follow Australia's example and ban the sale of inefficient light bulbs? This is a country, of course, that refused to sign Kyoto, which has taken a very practical step that we seem unable to take here.
It's a good point. And we are doing it, but we're not doing it alone. We're doing it as part of the 27 members of the European Union. So we'll cover 475 million people rather than just 55 or 60 million.
But this is a firm. Sorry.
What we're going to try and do, Jeremy Paxman up here, it's totally throwing me off that train of thought. Yeah, what we're trying to do is get a voluntary agreement with the industry to do it here first. But I think if we can do it across 475 million people for the whole of Europe, it's a European regulation, all of our product standards are set at European level, that'll be the way to do it.
Okay, and...
My name's Elizabeth Mendes Acosta, and I want to ask you, if you thought your salary would be on the line, if you mentioned that Kyoto is way not enough, and that we need a formal carbon rationing individual scheme, and we also need to stop flying.
Thank you, David. I think you said something about carbon rationing, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, my job's always on the line, so I sort of got used to that. But the every time I appear on the platform with Tony, it's definitely dangerous. I think that the individual contribution to this is important. I mean, you've got a bit of that in the Al Gore thing, that government has a responsibility, business has a responsibility, but household decisions represent about 44% of total UK emissions through electricity, heat and transport. And so I've been talking about how an individual allocation system would work. Every citizen of the country would get a certain carbon or pollution allocation, a sort of pollution permit, if you like. If you were environmentally thrifty, you'd actually make money out of it. If you were a spendthrift, you would have to pay for it.
But the other part of the question was about the Kyoto commitments and the adequacy of those. Well, one thing that became clear earlier this month with the publication of the IPCC's fourth assessment report is that we, 10 years ago, when we were thinking about targets for greenhouse gas reduction, were thinking about a doubling of historic concentrations being within tolerable bounds. Now it's being suggested very strongly by the science that that was a dramatic overestimate of what's possible to do to the atmosphere before we start to invoke very serious risks for the economy and society. The existing target that we have in the UK of 60% reduction by 2050 compared to 1990 is based upon the old figures. Do you think it's time to revise the British government's estimates of what needs to be done by when?
Is Kyoto adequate on its own? Obviously not least because the United States is not party to it, and it's 25% of global emissions, and China and India, the developing world is going to, correct me, you may have a figure, but the developing world, not on a per capita basis, but total, is going to have greater emissions than the industrialized world by 2015, I think, or 2020 maybe. Anyway, within a relatively short space of time, the developing world, although their per capita emissions are much lower than ours, is going to be emitting more than all the rich countries combined. So that's why Kyoto on its own is not enough. And you're right, the science has become more urgent and more pressing. I mean, I always say that I thought when I got this job about 9 months ago, that 9 or 10 months ago, that I followed this climate change debate reasonably closely. But the truth is, I don't think I've followed it closely enough. I'm 41, this is an issue for my lifetime, not just for my grandchildren's lifetime. So the science has become more dramatic. The issue of the target, I think there's now a consensus in the UK that we need to do at least 60%. And it's a consensus that embraces all political parties, it embraces all the environmental charities, it embraces all of business as well. And so the answer I would give to you is that I think it's right that the bill starts from the basis that at least a 60% reduction is required on 1990 levels by 2050. There are profound issues left out of that. I mean, you didn't mention aviation. No. That isn't part of the figure. So if you say to me, does that have to be fixed in stone for all time? I mean, I think that's a different debate. Do I think now is the time to say, let's rip it all up and start again? I don't think that would be tactically sensible, because I think we've got 60% reduction by 2050 is a huge effort in itself, a fundamental change to the way we live and work. Let's get ourselves onto that. Just a final point. Al Gore says that British people should be proud of the fact that their country is the only country in the world to be on track to more than double its commitments under the Kyoto Protocol. He also says that's not enough, we've got to go further. I agree with that, but let's remember that there's significant progress on which to build, and we've got to use our example of how you can move towards a lower greenhouse gas economy to show that others can do it as well without compromising the economic growth that for a country like India and China is essential if you believe in poverty reduction and the development rights of people around the world.
It's maybe